Hey everyone, more from the NFL owners meeting in Houston at Westin Memorial City. As I said in the previous video, people were milling about going to different restaurants and bars in the main lobby, and I managed to go to another one after my first encounter and had a number of great conversations and then left and asked the lobby representatives for the hotel to hail a cab for me, which they did because I was going to use Uber. I'm going to use Uber. And then I tried Lyft, but guess what? There's no Lyft service in Houston, at least in that part of Houston. Well, if there's no Lyft service in that part of Houston, there's no Lyft service, right? Lyft isn't in Houston. So, hail a cab. Cab finally arrives after about 15 or 20 minutes. And during the time I'm waiting, I noticed there was you couldn't miss them, an entourage of about 8 people walking in, including at the end of the group was former St. Louis Rams, now LA Rams owner Stan Kroenke, and they went to the elevator and everything else. And I basically paid little attention because I was exhausted. I was absolutely ready to just go to bed and get some rest. At any rate, but I digress. My cab finally arrives. And I go to get it, but there's a fellow in front of me whose description I am not giving. And he gets in ahead of me. And someone says, well, this is his cab, I think. And I said, I thought that was my cab. And I said, that's okay. I'll have the gentleman hail another one for me. And so the man who gets in the cab says, no, that's okay. Come with me. So I did. He proceeded to tell me about what transpired that day. And I realized when I got a good look at him that he was part of that entourage that walked in with Stan Kroenke. Okay? So, that's about all I'll say about his description. He told me a number of interesting things. First of all, I quizzed him about the cost of the luxury boxes for the stadium, and he said the Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones not only sold the owners on the idea that those luxury boxes could turn over at high prices, but at $1 million. And this gentleman said that Jones has an interesting idea of how that can go about in the LA context. He also said that the stadium's price, we at $2.6 billion. And I said, is that going to be a private placement bond issue? And he said, it is. Now, a private placement bond issue means that the revenue comes from the stadium. It's paid for via bonds that are securitized. And if the government is involved as a stadium authority, then it would be for an industrial development bond, like I've been talking about, right? But the nature of those bonds is such that the backstop isn't, in other words, the organization that is the safety net against default isn't the government at all. It's the banks. And the man said that Stan Kroenke has a great relationship with a number of banks, as you would guess. If that's the case, this will be the largest private placement ever done for a sports facility in the United States, if not the world. But I know in America, because right now, the St. Louis Cardinals Bush Memorial Stadium stands as the largest one at $220 million. Excuse me. Cardinals, and then of course the Giants, San Francisco Giants Stadium at $450 million. Both are private placement bond issues. Now, he then said something else, that Mark Davis originally would have gotten $500 million from the NFL for the Raiders Stadium in Oakland if the 6-person committee had selected Inglewood and not Carson, but because Carson was selected, that was pulled off the table. The $100 million plan came up later in the meeting. And so that explains that difference. Now, the other bit of news he told me right on the heels of that was that Mark Davis would have to pay $1 billion. Not Mark Davis himself, but the Oakland Raiders would have to pay $1 billion to enter Stan Kroenke's LA Stadium. You heard me correctly, $1 billion. And keep in mind that a number of news outlets have said that NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell has never discussed the relocation fee for either the Raiders or the Chargers. I don't know if this applies to the Chargers. I was focused on the Raiders, but he specifically said not only was that it was at $1 billion, but he also said Mark Davis can't afford that. There you go.